of the Lord. It's in Leviticus 23. Verse 1 and 2. Excuse me, verses 1 and 2. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feast of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feasts. So, as they came out of Egypt, God instituted one of the feasts. It's the Passover. It's what we know as the Passover. But after they got into the wilderness, he set up 7 different feast times. Okay, now there's additional, in today's Jewish society, there's an additional couple that, of course, in Moses' times wasn't around. Hanukkah was celebrated later, and then there's, a Purim feast, the Purim, which was in Esther's time, which was after Moses and them, of course. But these are the feasts to be, it says, a holy convocation, or again, a separation from the nations, okay? They have, the pagans at their time, they had different feasts or different times. They would pray to their gods and have their different areas for the seasons that they would hope to bring crops and hope to do this, hope to do that. Well, God set these forth for the Jewish people to remember Him. And they do it each and every year. And He told them as they go out, go through it. Some are one day, and some are more than one day. So as we go through this, we'll kind of learn that this is from gratitude, being from God. Okay? These feasts is gratitude for what God has done for them and what God continues to give them. These special displays of mercy and kindness and providential care for God should be particularly remembered when we recollect that we deserve nothing at His hands and that the debt of gratitude is all the debt we can pay. In it, we should be cheerful, fervent, and frequent. An ungrateful heart is an unfeeling, unloving, unbelieving, and disobedient heart. Now, these feasts are going on today, even in the Jewish society. But for the Christian society, we also have times that we don't have, quote, feasts, but that we celebrate. One of them is coming up. It's Easter, that we celebrate the resurrection. And then one other one after that, 50 days after that's Pentecost. And we'll get into more of that. But just as the Jewish people has some, today's Christians has some also. Verse 3, Brother Epperson.
6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of rest and holy convocation. Ye shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwelling.
Okay. This is set aside. This was from when they, excuse me, from the very beginning. When God rested on the 7th day, He created on 6 days, the first 6 days, and on the 7th day He rested. So this is mimicking what God did in the creation. The first 6 days of the week says work shall be done. A lot of people miss out on that. They do the 7th day, but it says 6 days you shall work. And then the 7th day is the day of rest. Just to do just like God did. Centuries after this, when the Jewish people were scattered in exile, they started to meet in synagogues on the morning of the Sabbath. The only appointed place for sacrifice was the altar at the tabernacle. Yet it may be even before that, the establishment of the synagogue in exile, Israelites gathered on the Sabbath in a holy convocation, meeting to pray together and hear from the teaching Levites spread around the land of Israel. So, this in 70 AD is what this is talking about, when they were scattered abroad. Then, well, even centuries after that, before that, when they were scattered from the different times, the tribe of Israel, or the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, they didn't have a temple anymore. So they had to go back. As they built it back up, coming to Herod's time and Jesus' time, they had that going on, the temple, but then in 70 AD it was shut down. So it says, when Christians gather today on an appointed day of the week, and most of the time for us it's Sunday, they gather as a holy convocation and a sacred gathering before the Lord. This phrase in verse 3 seems to emphasize that the day must be set aside for religious observance, and the ordinary daily occupations were to be avoided. So there wasn't no football back then. There wasn't no nothing like that. It was to be set aside for them, and just to be a day of rest, to think about the goodness of God and the gratefulness of Him. This is a shortened form of Exodus 28 through 11, and it commands not only the Sabbath day, but also the 6 days of work. He who idles his time away in the 6 days is equally culpable in the sight of God as he who works on the seventh. So if you're doing one or the other, it's you got to do both. You can't do just one. It says, like everything in the Bible, we understand the Sabbath of solemn rest from the perspective of the whole Bible, not only this single passage. With this understanding, we see there's a real sense in which Jesus fulfilled the purpose and the plan of the Sabbath for us and in us. Jesus is our rest, so now every day is our rest in Him. Okay? Therefore, the whole Scripture makes it clear that under the New Covenant, no one is under obligation to observe a Sabbath day. And it tells us in Colossians, Galatians, and some other places. It tells us as Christians are not bound to observe days or months or seasons and years. The rest we enter into as Christians is something to experience every day, not just one day a week. This is the rest of knowing we don't have to work to save ourselves, but our salvation is accomplished in Jesus Christ. So every week, they would have to kind of review themselves and see, okay, do I need to take a sacrifice, or do I need to do all this? And if they did, they have to. So we don't have to do that. We need to review ourselves, yes. If we've sinned during the week or something, we need to not only take it on the Sabbath, we need to do it right away. But because of that, Jesus made a way for us that we don't have to rely upon that. The Sabbath command here and observed by Israel was a shadow of the things to come, it says in Colossians chapter 2. The New Covenant, the idea that there is no Sabbath, but every day is a Sabbath day of rest. Okay, the first of 4 feasts that are celebrated in the spring. 4 of these are in the spring time, early time of the year, and then the last 3 are in the fall time. Can you read that 4 and 5 for us, Iris?
These are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations, which ye shall proclaim in their seasons. In the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover.
Okay. And this goes back to the very first time they did it, when they left Egypt. And it tells them the 14th day of the first month. And that's known, it says at Nisan, Nisan, is their month, the Jewish month. And Passover is held on the 14th of Nisan each year. And since all of their days start at this time of the day, okay, it's the ending of their full day from yesterday, and once the sun sets, it's the next day for them. So that would be their Passover. And that's exactly what happened in the old time, or back when they left Egypt, that it was the evening time, and God told them to make haste and get ready, for the angel of the Lord is going to come by. And during that night's when they had the Passover. The angel went over in the Passover, and they.
Now, explain that one more time. Twilight was at the end of one day and the beginning of the new day.
Of the next day. So it's like our midnight. You know, we say midnight at 12 o'clock. It's just moving it up 6 hours or 5 hours, whatever it is. So we would be winding up the 24 hours of their whatever day, 14th day or 15th day. And there is a little, I read some of the commentary said there is a little confusion on that, whether it's held on the 14th or the 15th. It says the 14th day, and then later on, I guess, in history, they changed it to be the 15th day. But here it's telling them to start on the 14th day, that day, that Passover day. So from then on, then they were to do no work. From that evening when it started to the end of the next day, or the evening of the next day, they couldn't do any work. So gives them a little ability to do some work, because as we would say, because after the nighttime, you know, if you need to do something, it would be the next day, so it'd be all right. Exodus 12 is where the Lord's Passover occurred, where we read about it first. There goes the guys. I don't know if that's a little deep or what.
Yeah.
It says the command was recognized as the Lord's Passover before Israel had celebrated a second Passover. So they had celebrated the first one, but they had left Egypt, and then this command comes out before the end of the full year. So now they're getting ready to celebrate the second Passover. The memory of the first Passover was still fresh in their minds, and God wanted it to remain fresh. From that time, God commanded Israel to observe the feast of Passover to commemorate not only their deliverance from Egypt, but also the escape of God's judgment as they applied and trusted in the blood of the Lamb. Of course, in the New Testament, Jesus is clearly identified as our Passover Lamb, and the death of Christ was at Passover. He is the Lamb of God, and it is blood that makes the judgment of God pass over each of us. So through Christ's death and his blood that he shed, he spread it across our doorposts of our lives. That's what he did. 6, 7, and 8. Harold, you want to read those?
And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto the Lord. 7 days ye must eat unleavened bread. In the first day ye shall have an holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein, but ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord 7 days. And the seventh day in an holy convocation ye shall do no servile work therein.
Okay. So right following the Passover is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The very next day starts that week. So this one is a full week. The first day of the week, or first day of the Passover, I'll get it right in a minute. First day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, those are both days that you can't do any work. And of course, during that week, you could only eat unleavened bread. Why do they, and they said, as you go through here and read some of the commentary, that they would clear out all the leaven from all their houses. They'd clean everything out and start over again. Why do you think they do that? They have, as we do today, we have yeast that we can start leaven with or not. What they did is kind of like they do with those sourdough bread today. You you'd mix it up, and then you take part of it out, put the other back, and then you'd make this up, and then you'd start again. You'd start the same loaf. As you go through, you might contaminate that, and it might get contaminated some through the year. So then they clean everything out in that year and start all over again. And that way, that again brings about kind of the health issues of just eating the unleavened bread. Not that yeast may go bad, or something may contaminate it. It may not go bad, but it may just get contaminated. It says the celebration of Passover and unleavened bread marks the commencement of Israel's national existence. Thus, it corresponds to the celebration of Independence Day for the United States. Then it says, spiritually speaking, this feast was an illustration of the purity that God wanted Israel to live out after the blood deliverance of the Passover. Yeast is a picture of sin and corruption because of the way a little leaven influences a whole lump of bread and dough, and because the leaven puffs up just like we might puff up with pride. So it's to get us under control again, kind of as a check all through the year to keep us under check. 1 Corinthians tells us, therefore purge out the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, since you truly are unleavened. For indeed, Christ our Passover was sacrificed for us. Therefore let us keep the feast, not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. So a consistent message through the feasts, all these feasts, is the rest of God has for his people is greater than the Sabbath. That greater rest is fulfilled in the work of Christ. Okay, the third feast that we come upon, Sister Janet, 9 through 14.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when you be come into the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest. And he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord, to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. And you shall offer that day, when you wave the sheaf, an he lamb without blemish of the first year, for a burnt offering unto the Lord. And the meat offering thereof shall be 2 deals of fine flour mingled with oil, an offering made by fire unto the Lord for a sweet savor. And the drink offering thereof shall be of wine, the 4th part of an hin. And you shall eat neither bread, nor parched corn, nor green ears, until the selfsame day that you have brought an offering unto your God. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings.
Okay. Now, this being the first fruits, it's in the spring. A lot of this is happening. What ripens about this time of year? What's normally ripening? I mean, for us, it's going to be a little different than them. But here, what's going on right now in the fields? Do you know?
Yeah, winter wheat.
You got winter wheat. So that usually comes off in late April or early May. Starts turning green. There's a lot of it around here. And that's kind of what it's talking about here. You shall either eat bread, nor parched corn, nor green ears. There were several different crops that they had that was coming off at that particular time of the year. So those are the first fruits of that year and of that crop. And they weren't supposed to partake of that until they made their offering of that first fruits, whatever it is, either the sheaf of wheat or barley. I think barley's another one. Any of that, until they did that, they weren't to partake of it. What does that remind us of? kind of a tithe. The first fruits that we have of our income, we're supposed to give forth to the Lord. Well, this is what they would have. That would be their income for the year. You know, what they're having. One of their incomes. They'd have several of them throughout. And there's going to be some others as we go through this. But this particular time, that's what it's to do. And they do these. It has the wave offering, but it also has offerings that they have to make a meat offering. It says, bring the lamb without blemish in the first year for a burnt offering for them. And the meat offering shall be, and the meat offering, as we said before, there is grain. The grain offering shall be 2 tenths of fine flour mingled with oil and made by fire, a sweet savor for the Lord. Then a drink offering. We've never really heard of the drink offering until now, but it's of wine and the 4th part of a hin, which I think down here somewhere it says it's about a quart or a liter or something like that. So this is to celebrate the coming harvest because they know it's coming. And a lot of times the farmers will go out and do a test cut, do a test strip to see how it's coming along. They do that even today. They'll go out and check the moisture in the wheat, the moisture in the hay and all those things, so they know just exactly it's time to cut it, because you know, if it's too wet or too dry, it's not going to do right.
Well, you know, even today, a lot of the farmers, exceptionally so on the dairy, they try to trigger it where they're going to have more of their birth rate of the animals in the spring, because you get a higher milk output during that time, and then they trigger it where they get that one, and then when the green grass hits, they get another surge on it. And I'm assuming that whatever was the first calf, the first oxen, first any of that. It says the ram, but it
could be whatever. Yeah,
it could be whatever they had.
Back then, it's whatever was around. The cattle, they're all kind of lumped under as herding. But that's true. That's true. And it's also too. They tried to. It's a lesser season. It's not going to be as cold on the animals, on the young ones, and all this thing. So hopefully that. Now they always, you know, you'll have some during the cold time and all that too. It just happens, but not. They try to make it that way. Any questions on that? Down here at the bottom of page 7, where it's talking about the parched grain and all that. Parched ears of corn and green ears fried still constitute a part and not a disagreeable one of the foods the Arabs now resident in the Holy Land. So I guess that's what they eat today, some of those.
Fried green corn?
I guess so, instead of fried green tomatoes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Was hard.
parched, I would think it'd be pretty hard. Of course, they probably boiled it or something to make it soft. But, okay, the 4th feast is the Feast of Weeks, or it's what we also call Pentecost, okay, the Christians. 15, verse 15, it starts, and ye shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that ye brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete, or 7 weeks. Even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall ye number 50 days. And ye shall offer a new meat offering unto the Lord. Ye shall bring out of your habitations 2 wave loaves of 2 tenth deals, and they, they shall be of fine flour. They shall be baken with leaven. They are the first fruits unto the Lord. And ye shall offer with the bread 7 lambs without blemish of the first year, and 1 young bullock, and 2 rams. They shall be for a burnt offering unto the Lord, and their meat offering, and their drink offerings, even an offering made by fire of sweet savor unto the Lord. Then ye shall sacrifice 1 kid of the goats for a sin offering, and 2 lambs of the first year for a sacrifice of peace offerings. And the priest shall wave them with the bread of the first fruits for a wave offering before the Lord with the 2 lambs. They shall be holy to the Lord for the priest, and ye shall proclaim on the selfsame day that it shall be a holy convocation unto you. Ye shall do no servile work. It shall be a statute forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. So this is where we get Pentecost. It happened to occur at the same time as their Feast of Weeks. Okay? And they call that because it's 7 weeks, 7 Sabbaths past that. The day after that is then the 50th day. And that's where Pentecost is, because Pentecost means 50. Pente means 50. So Feast of the Days of the Feast of the First Fruits, at the completion of the wheat harvest, Israel was to celebrate the Feast of Weeks. Also the Feast of Ingathering in Exodus 23. And in Pentecost in Acts 2:1 and 20 and 16, by bringing a new grain offering to the Lord and offering specific sacrifices. And then it tells about the 50th day in Greek. Pentecost is 50, means 50 in Greek. So the way that they accorded to the Hebrew way of calculating the beginning and ending days of any period are counted. So you shall bring from your dwellings 2 wavelets. It goes through each one of these, and the 7 lambs and the young bull. Each one of these is to represent specific messages and specific symbols from God to command these offerings that was given to them. Okay? And we see that sometimes it's given, goes back, and we haven't got to Numbers yet, but Numbers says it is 2 young bullocks and 1 ram. So it goes back and forth, and we talked about this before. Sometimes some people weren't able to do it. This is more of a national. I don't think each family had to do this. Now they had to do the feast offerings, but maybe it was that each family did this too. Boy, that's going to be a lot of meat.
Yeah.
A lot of sacrifices going on. It says, generally speaking, Israel was forbidden. It's talking about, and that was one thing I found interesting. You shall bring 2 wave loaves, but they were large pita bread, but these were to be baked with leaven. Okay, so this one had that, and said this was highly unusual. Generally speaking, Israel was forbidden from offering any kind of leaven or yeast with a blood offering. There was a special symbolic message from God in the command to wave 2 leavened loaves of bread before him at the Feast of Weeks, and then to offer those loaves with the burnt offerings. So they made it up, but then they used it as burnt offering. And of course, the burnt offering, everything's burnt up. So here again, got to keep track of what's what, when you do it, and where you do it, so you don't get caught doing it wrong. Okay, Brother Epperson, 22.
And when you reap the harvest of your hand, thou shalt not make clean riddance of the corners of thy field which thou reapest, neither shalt thou gather any gleaning of thy harvest. Thou shalt leave them to the poor and to the stranger. I am the Lord your God.
This goes back to whenever they, to help the poor and to help the strangers in the land, that they're not, they leave some for them, whether it's in the corners of the field, on the sides of the field, or when you're gathering. If you drop some of the fruit, just leave it there, and then people come by and they can pick it up. I think I told this story before, but we went up to Canada, and when we was at, I think it's Quebec, when we was up there, they had a cider that they made with, they called, wasn't frozen apples, but it's felled apples or something like that. They let the apples fall off the tree and rot for a while before they picked it up and they made cider. It was hard cider. It was vinegar is what it was because it was nasty. They offered us a little glass and I was like, yeah, we'll take some cider. You know, walked in there and thought, where can I spit this out? It was so nasty. Oh my goodness. But that's what some of them did. Well, you have the people that's going through the land, if they knew what was, you know, who was the big property owners and stuff, they could boat by there. We see that in the story with Ruth and her mother-in-law and Boaz. Naomi, and that they would go through, and that's the way they made the living. Some people, it's just allowing them, to work, to get some food.
You know what's interesting though, they didn't give it to them.
No, they didn't give it to them. They had to go get it. They had to work for it. That's right. It's one of those things that all of it. It's like you got to work for it. You got to do something for it.
And where it says of the strangers, do you feel like that, kind of like you was to say it, people know that the harvest is coming, whether they were part of the Jewish or not, if they knew it, they could come in there and partake of it. Now, we see abuse of that even in today's time.
Right.
And it makes me wonder, how did they restrict it from being abused by people that wanted the Jewish deal coming in on that?
Well, again, I think you go back to, first of all, they drove the people out that was in there. There were some that they completely wiped out. Some they didn't. Some were just passing through from Egypt, going back and forth, and they may have been poor, kind of like Mary and Joseph as they was going down to Egypt. You can't pack in that. I don't know how many day journey that is from Jerusalem to Egypt. That's got to be a long ways. And they had to go along the way and pick some stuff up as they had. And a certain time of year, there may not be very much there. I don't think there was a lot. Now, there may have been, as we've seen, again, in like Solomon's time and David's time, where the Philistines would come over and burn the crops, stuff trying to make the Israelite people mad or trying to run them out. So I think they protected their areas.
Well, I
somewhat.
didn't know if you had read anything, because he was leaving it for the Jewish people.
Yes.
Was number one
Yes.
on that.
Yeah.
But if you had other people that wanted to come in essence, they were stealing from the poor Jewish people that didn't have anything.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how, if you read how they restricted that or.
I don't think so. I think, you're pretty well traveling. It's limited. So they're not going to go too far outside if they know they're, just like today, where do they congregate? They congregate where they think they can get the most money.
Yeah.
Back then, we think everybody had houses. No, I don't think they did. I think they lived in tents and, still somewhat nomadic, those that didn't have much. They would go around and they would also, as we have read or going to be reading, I guess in the future, I'm ahead a little bit in my own reading. If I don't have enough I can make myself a slave for somebody for X years and live with them and work, and they'll feed me, and my family and whatever. So I don't know how much of a problem. I don't think it was a lot of problem, but we do see instances of it in the Old Testament where they come back.
I hadn't read anything about how they governed it or whatever, and they may not have.
Well, even Naomi was a Jew, but Ruth wasn't, and her other daughter-in-law wasn't. But they were with Naomi, so they would allow them to gather in the field. So I think it's, they just pretty well left it open, I think. But
well, I like what Brother Emerson said about they didn't just give it to them too. I mean, in the Bible talks, if you don't work, you don't eat.
That's right.
They still taught them on that.
That's right. And the last feast, the 3 feasts that are in the fall. Now we'll go to the 5th feast, which is the Feast of Trumpets, or it's known as Rosh Hashanah. Verse 23, Iris, 23, 24, and 25.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, in the 1st day of the month, shall ye have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, and holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein, but ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord.
Now it seems like it's concentrated in two particular times, in the spring and in the fall. I know when we went to Germany, trying to remember. I know one time, the first time we went, it was in the spring, around Mother's Day, kind of early Mother's Day. And I was thinking the last time it was because it's Oktoberfest, it's in October. Both times we went, we were there the first time quite a while, about 3 weeks. It was, well, I guess it was about 2 weeks with my mom and dad. But out of that 14 or 20 days, whatever we were there, it seemed like there was about 5 or 6 holidays that they had, because we was trying to go to, stuff and see stuff, and the stores were closed. We couldn't go to it. Same thing in October, when of course Oktoberfest going on all the time, but it seemed like they had every day was, their May 1st is May Day or May Toll Day, and then they had another holiday and another. It's like, man, do these people ever work? It just seems like it. And here in these particular times of the year, it's concentrated for them, because they have a whole week. They could work in between, but it's still, no work in those. They were to remember this week. So this is the Feast of Trumpets on the 7th month. That month in their calendar is called Tishri, if I'm pronouncing it right. So on that first day, they would blow the trumpet, and they would have a memorial of blowing the trumpets for that. Said, this is the fall festivals. It's the trumpets, then the Day of Atonement, and then the Tabernacles, or Feast of Weeks. And this is the 7th, during the 7th month, which is September/October. And these are in conjunction with the second harvest, which is grapes, figs, and olives. Those are kind of late in the year, those on the trees and the fruits of the trees that they had around there. This special rest, or trumpets, were blown to gather God's people for a holy convocation. And there was an offering made by fire to the Lord. The trumpets called them to cease from their servile work in order to worship. It's kind of a call to arms at the end of getting close to the end of the year for them, to rest again after the working of the season. Okay? 26 through 32. You going to read that for us, Harold?
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Also on the 10th day of this 7th month there shall be a day of atonement. It shall be an holy convocation unto you, and ye shall afflict your souls and offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. And ye shall do no work in that same day, for it is the Day of Atonement, to make an atonement for you before the Lord your God. For whatsoever soul it be that shall not be afflicted in that same day, he shall be cut off from among his people. And whatsoever soul it be that doeth any work in that same day, the same soul will I destroy from among the people. Ye shall do no manner of work. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all of your dwellings. And it shall be unto you a Sabbath of rest, and ye shall afflict your souls in the 9th day of the month at even. From even unto even shall ye celebrate your Sabbath.
Okay. And we've read about this before. We talked about it a little bit. The people, they gathered together for this, but this was not a celebration feast, but a day to afflict your souls. Okay? And sometimes that we see it in Leviticus, but both there's no specific direction or instruction on what it means to afflict your souls, except what they have been interpreted to mean as fasting or for the entire day, and make it a day of solemn reflection over someone's sins and life of the previous year. So it was a time to set aside, and that would be an affliction. I mean, others have taken it to where they beat themselves on the back and do all kinds of things, crazy things, but this is something that was to honor God and to remind them of God. So this is what their interpretation that they think it was. And it's a pretty strong statement for punishment or disobedience of this.
Yes.
So that's unique in all these different feasts. God wanted his people to use this as a day of repentance, humble repentance, and cease from their own work, while the high priest worked hard to make the sacrifice that would bring atonement to the people of God.
It wasn't on that, for a celebration, it wasn't much of a day of
It
celebration.
wasn't a celebration like the other feasts were. Won't you read 33 through about 39 for us, Janet, and I'll finish the rest of that. It's a big old long passage.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, The 15th day of this 7th month shall be the feast of tabernacles for 7 days unto the Lord. On the first day shall be an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. On the 8th day shall be an holy convocation unto you, and you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. It is a solemn assembly, and you shall do no servile work therein. These are the feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, to offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord, a burnt offering and a meat offering, a sacrifice and drink offerings, everything upon this day. How much farther?
That's fine. Besides the Sabbaths of the Lord, and beside your gifts, and beside all your vows, and beside all your freewill offerings, which ye give unto the Lord, also in the 15th day of the 7th month, when ye have gathered in the fruit of the land, ye shall keep a feast unto the Lord 7 days. On the first day shall be a Sabbath, and on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. And ye shall take you on the first day the boughs of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, and the boughs of fig trees, and willows of the brook. And ye shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. And ye shall keep it a feast unto the Lord 7 days in the year. It shall be a statute forever in your generations. Ye shall celebrate it in the 7th month. Ye shall dwell in booths 7 days. All that are Israelites born shall dwell in booths. That your generations may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. And Moses declared unto the children of Israel the feasts of the Lord. So here again, this matches kind of the springtime. They had one feast that was a week long, started at one Sabbath, and you couldn't do any work on it. And then all the way through that week till the end of the next week, which is that next Sabbath, they couldn't do any work on that. And they had the sacrifices just like they did before, except this time they had to move out of their houses and move into a temporary structure is what it is. They'd just make a booth or make we'd call it a tent maybe, but they'd make a covering, they'd make it out of the trees. They'd just get some, trees and make it up, make a little roof on it, put some fig leaves, any kind of leaves they had on it to keep the sun out for 7 days. Now why did they do that for? Because that's when they left Egypt, they didn't have anything. So they had to build their own tents. They had to build their own living structures while they were coming, moving during that particular time. Alexander McLaren noted that the Jewish Talmud says that on each of the 7 days of the Feast of Tabernacles, and according to one rabbi, also on the 8th day, a priest went down to the pool of Siloam and drew water in a golden pitcher, which he brought back to the altar, pouring the water into a silver basin, as the worshippers sang psalms from the great Hallel collection of Psalms 113 through 118. This celebrated the water God miraculously provided for Israel in the wilderness. Then on the last day of that great feast, Jesus stood and cried out, saying, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. He who believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." So it's, that bringing it out of the spring or the
Some of these drink offerings, so they didn't drink, they just.
no, they poured out. They poured it out before the Lord.
Before the Lord.
Yeah. That's what they did. That was something, they brought it for him and they poured it out. Now, the bread offering and that stuff, they would bring, some of it they would burn up, some of it they'd give to the priest. So it all depends on which one and which offering it was for. Now, the Feast of Tabernacles, it says, was the consecration of joy. Other religions have had their festivals in which wild tumult and foul orgies have debased the worshippers to the level of their gods. How different the pure gladness of this feast before the Lord. So this one was something set up for them. All these were to show again that the Israelite people was so different, than what the people around them were. Says a prophecy in Zechariah 14:16-19 tells us that the Feast of Tabernacles will be celebrated by all the nations under the universal kingdom of the Messiah. So that's something to look forward to as it's coming up. And the reading of the law every 7 years to the congregation was also a distinction of the Feast of Tabernacles. It says booths were erected in their cities or towns, either in the streets or gardens or on the tops of their houses, which were made flat, and therefore were proper and fit for that use. So they could make it anywhere they, was there. It didn't have to be, but they would stay in them, try to stay in them for that particular week. This says God intended a great social good in appointing the Sabbath and these yearly feasts. In almost all other ancient cultures, there was no weekly day of rest, and there were no holidays. For Israel, God commanded a weekly day of rest, special holidays, and vacation days. All of these were centered upon Him. Okay, the last couple pages is a lot of, we can go through them, but it's a lot to, you just read through them, why don't you, on your own. It goes through and talks about it a little bit more and how it corresponds to the New Testament. Any questions or any comments?
I want to go to verse 24 again.
Okay.
This said, that they shall have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, and holy convocation. So my question is, did every male that was able, did they blow a trumpet? Was it just the oldest male of the family? What?
I think the trumpets were blown by the priest. We go back and there is a, if you want to say it, a priestly band. Okay, they blow the shofar.
Uh-huh.
I don't think per se, I think it's the blowing of trumpets. It doesn't say anywhere in here that you were to the God's people, individual people, to blow it. It's a remembrance call from God to the people.
So it was priests that did the blowing?
I think so, as priests or Levites, whichever ones. I'll have to look that up for sure, but I think that's what it.
That makes more sense like that.
Yeah.
And when they say trumpets, was they talking about shofars?
It's whatever they had, and I think a lot of it was the shofar, but they may have had it. They had all kinds of musical instruments.
Well, they're,
The ram's horn.
it says
Another
blow the
one.
trumpet in Zion and
Mhm.
sound the alarm.
Mhm.
That was the priest's job to do that. I mean, it was their, to call, it was to bring attention,
Right.
okay? In other words, it's time to start to worship the Lord.
Kind of like today, I mean, we're not in the army or anything, but when they blow taps or blow retreat, today, when the tornado, you'll hear that tornado siren going off, you're like, okay, you better start looking out, or if it's the first Wednesday, you know, okay, I don't have to worry. They're just testing, things like that. I think that's what it is. It's something you hear, and that's what they relied upon. That will go, that sound will travel, and they'll hear it. And as we realize in the time where they set aside, and it's not yet, but they set aside other Levite areas, you know, they gave the Levites some land. They may have been blowing them there at the same time they're blowing them over here in a different city. Not just always in the Jerusalem area. So it's calling it, and it may be even in any town. I'm not real sure. Any other questions? Appreciate y'all coming out.
I appreciate the work you put into the assessment. I like reading the commentaries